Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm bringing you the next episode in the story of Hoai and Hung. In the previous part, Hoai suddenly became the prime suspect in the case of 10 million dong missing from the supermarket where she worked. A series of seemingly undeniable pieces of evidence pointed straight at her. The security camera footage had been completely wiped, the only remaining fingerprint belonged to her, and the money safe key was held by only 2 people. Everything appeared to be pressing down on her fragile shoulders, and she couldn't understand why her peaceful life had been dragged into such a cruel storm. Hoai was taken to the police station to give her statement. Her footsteps echoed down the long, cold hallway, as if she were entering a foreign world, one where every desk, every stare, every question made her feel more alone than ever. Though fear churned inside her, she tried her best to stay calm, repeatedly insisting that she was innocent. But the more she spoke, the more her voice trembled, weighed down by fear and helplessness, especially when no one had enough evidence to stand on her side. Meanwhile, 3 hours away, Hung was stunned when he heard the news. He dropped everything he was doing, jumped into his motorbike, and sped toward the police station without wasting a single second. The long road felt endless that day, each passing minute tightening the weight on his chest. He feared that Hoai was facing the interrogation alone, feared she was being misunderstood, feared she might cry without anyone there to comfort her. Nothing could slow him down, his unwavering faith in her pushed him forward relentlessly. The moment he arrived, seeing Hoai sitting there with red, swollen eyes yet still trying to stay strong, he immediately knew she was suffering far more than she showed. He sat beside her, held her cold hands tightly, and said with a firm, unwavering voice, "I believe you. No matter what anyone says, no matter how hard this gets. I know you're innocent." Just one simple sentence, yet it breathed life back into her when everything around her seemed to collapse. Without hesitation, Hung began working with the police, helping review every detail of the case. When he learned that the supermarket's camera system had been completely erased, the investigative team had no choice but to search for footage from outside sources. It was a nearly impossible task, but Hung didn't falter. He and the officers went from place to place, looking for any camera that might have captured something. Cameras from nearby homes that might have recorded the entrance or parking area. Cameras from surrounding shops that often ran 24/7 with a wide angle of view. A small alley camera behind the supermarket, near the rarely used back door, an important but easily overlooked exit. Door after door was knocked on. Request after request for footage was made. Some agreed to help, some refused, some cameras were broken, and others had already overwritten the needed data. But Hung never gave up. He followed the officers from morning until late at night, stopping only briefly for water. His face grew tired and darkened from exhaustion, his eyes red from lack of sleep, yet his determination remained unshaken. In his heart, there was only one mission: to find the proof that would clear Hoai's name. Back at the police station, all the gathered footage was reviewed one by one. Every frame was slowed down, zoomed in, and inspected for even the tiniest clue. Hung sat close to the screen, barely blinking, afraid that even a small detail might slip by unnoticed. Each time the video showed nothing useful, his heart tightened, but he kept going. That night, Hung hardly slept. Hoai sat behind him, watching his slightly hunched back as he tirelessly searched for answers. She wanted to tell him to rest, but every time she tried, her words dissolved before leaving her lips. Partly because she knew he wouldn't listen, but also because, even in her despair, the warmth of knowing she wasn't fighting alone gave her strength. And just like that, in the thick silence of the late night, under the cold white glow of the fluorescent lights, the search for the truth continued, quietly opening a small but growing hope that the light of justice was finally near. Finally, After hours of reviewing every frame from the external cameras, a short video clip from a house near the supermarket became the turning point of the entire investigation. The clip wasn't long, but it was enough to make everyone in the room fall silent the moment it appeared on screen. In the grainy footage, tinted yellow by the streetlights, they saw a figure wearing the supermarket uniform, a familiar shape. It was a male employee, known among staff for frequently calling off work with all kinds of excuses: stomachache, headache, or urgent family matters. What mattered most was that on the day the money went missing, he did not have a scheduled shift. In fact, he had called in sick. Yet, the camera captured him sneaking behind the supermarket at the exact time frame when the money was discovered missing. He walked close to the wall, wearing a cap pulled low, hands deep in his pockets, eyes darting around nervously as if terrified of being seen. That short few-second clip made both Hung's heart and Hoai's heart tighten at once. A cold tension swept through the room. What caught the police's attention most was his behavior, entering from the back door, at the right time, in a suspicious manner that clearly suggested he was trying to hide something. Immediately, the focus of the investigation shifted toward him. The accusatory gazes previously aimed at Hoai now redirected toward this new suspect, someone whose actions were far more questionable than the innocent girl sitting quietly in the corner. When the police summoned him for questioning, he was visibly nervous. At first, he tried to maintain a calm facade, repeating the same excuses. "I was just passing by. I had some personal business. It has nothing to do with the missing money." But the tremble in his hands resting on the table, his avoidance of direct eye contact, and the sweat forming on his forehead made his words far from convincing. Everything collapsed the moment the police placed the video in front of him. The second his image appeared on the screen, he twitched as if shocked by electricity. He stuttered incoherently, lips tightening, eyes darting around the room in search of an escape that no longer existed. He swallowed hard repeatedly, sweat soaking the collar of his shirt. The room was dead silent except for his heavy breathing and the faint whir of the recording camera. Unable to deny it any longer, he slumped into his chair, drained of all strength, and finally confessed. He admitted that he had been addicted to gambling for years, drowning in debt far beyond what he could ever pay back. Each day he lived in fear, being chased, threatened, overwhelmed, until his mind became consumed by desperate thoughts of finding money at any cost. And then, on a day when he saw Hoai carelessly leave her locker slightly ajar, he got his dark idea.
He secretly took her key from her locker and made a duplicate without anyone noticing. Then, when no one was around, he quietly unlocked the safe and stole 10 million dong. To erase all evidence, he returned to the security room and wiped the entire camera system. He believed that once the footage disappeared, Hoai, the only person with a legitimate key, would become the perfect scapegoat. He thought he had planned everything flawlessly. Or at least, that's what he believed. But now, that supposedly perfect plan had crumbled completely. A single civilian camera had captured him at the exact critical moment, the one piece of evidence he could not escape. Hoai sat still, her red, tearful eyes filled with relief, as if a giant boulder had finally been lifted off her chest. Hung stood beside her, gripping her hand tightly, feeling her faint trembling, a mix of shock and overwhelming gratitude. The glow of the screen reflected on their faces, revealing one undeniable truth. The truth had finally found its way to the surface. After verifying the full confession and all the evidence collected, the police finally issued their official conclusion: Hoai was completely innocent. The words echoed in the small room, but to Hoai, they sounded like a bell of liberation, washing away days of exhaustion, humiliation, and the quiet fear that had been suffocating her. The moment the officer signed the report, Hoai's shoulders trembled slightly before sinking down, as if the heavy boulder she had been carrying for days had finally fallen away. Her breaths, once shaky and heavy, suddenly grew light, almost airy. Her eyes shimmered, no longer clouded by confusion, but slowly filling with a calmness she thought she had lost forever. Tony, her little boy who always clung to her, ran toward her and wrapped his tiny arms tightly around her waist. He buried his face in her chest as if he could sense that the storm had passed and the sunlight had finally returned. That warmth tightened something deep in her heart. All those days she had forced herself to be strong so her son wouldn't be afraid, yet only now did she truly feel how fragile she had been underneath it all. Hung stood right beside her, saying nothing at first. He simply placed his warm hand on her back, gently stroking it in slow, reassuring motions. His eyes softened, tender, steady, as if telling her that no matter what happened, he would always be there, right next to her. "I told you already. I believe you." His voice was low and firm, not loud, but every word sank deeply into Hoai's heart. That sentence, that unwavering trust he had put in her, broke the last bit of strength she was holding on to. The first tear fell, then several more followed in quick succession. Hoai burst into tears, not the tears of weakness, but the tears of someone finally cleared, finally understood, finally protected. All the bottled-up humiliation, fear for the future, and the injustice she had endured, all of it melted into those tears. And gratitude, too, gratitude for having someone like Hung standing by her side. Hung didn't say another word. He simply pulled her into his arms, letting her lean on his shoulder, letting her tears soak into his shirt without hesitation. Over the past stressful days, he had raced against time, worried for her every single minute, and now that everything was resolved, he felt himself being released too. After finishing all the procedures, the three quietly walked out of the police station. The cool air outside brushed against their faces, while the golden glow of the setting sun softened everything after hours of suffocating tension. Tony held his mother's hand, and Hung walked on her other side, forming a gentle, invisible shield around her. On the way home, Hung remained silent for a long while, as though weighing something carefully. It wasn't until they stopped by a small drink stall by the roadside that he finally turned to her, his voice more serious than usual. "You should rest. I don't want you to go through something like this ever again." Hoai looked up. There was no hesitation in his eyes, only determination. "I'll work more, earn more, and take care of you and Tony. Your job now is to rest, to take care of your son, not to carry any more burdens." His words weren't controlling, they were rooted in genuine concern. Hoai stared at him for so long that Hung paused, unsure whether he had said something wrong. But then, a faint smile appeared on her lips, fragile, trembling, but warm. She knew he wasn't a man of sweet words. He wasn't someone who easily expressed emotions. Most of his care had always shown through actions, riding 3 hours just to reach her, staying up all night watching camera footage, stepping forward to defend her against every suspicious glance. And now, these words were his strongest declaration of protection, of shelter, of faith. Hoai's heart tightened. Her eyes shone, wet but no longer dim. She nodded, just a small nod, but one filled with trust and gratitude. For the first time in days, she felt safe, truly safe. The feeling of being protected, of being someone worth caring for, of having someone stand up for her, warmed her heart in a way she never expected. After being cleared of all accusations, Hoai's life slowly returned to its familiar, peaceful rhythm. During the first few days after the incident, she still felt as though she had just stepped out of a long nightmare. Every morning when she woke up, she would gently touch her own cheek, as if to reassure herself that the tears from the night before were only traces of emotion, not the beginning of something terrible happening again. Tony still clung to her legs every time she was about to leave the house, and Hung continued quietly watching her every little movement, as if afraid something might happen to her again before he could react. Even though the truth was revealed, the emotional shock didn't fade overnight. Every time she walked past the old supermarket, a cold shiver still ran down her spine. She remembered the suspicious stares, the feeling of being cornered like a criminal, and the moment when no one believed her except Hung. But for that very reason, she cherished her current peace even more. Every afternoon, when the breeze brushed against the porch, she would stand still for a few moments, breathing deeply to remind herself that the storm had truly passed. Hung, on the other hand, experienced those days after the ordeal very differently. For him, it was a quiet period of reflection. He noticed that Hoai smiled more gently now, though a faint trace of worry still flickered in her eyes from time to time. He wanted to protect her more, to stay by her side longer, to make up for all the fear she had endured during the days she was wrongfully accused. He quietly washed the dishes for her, volunteered to take Tony to and from school, and sometimes slipped little snacks she loved into the kitchen drawer. No one said anything out loud, but both of them felt a subtle yet undeniable shift between them. A new closeness, a deeper sense of comfort, a quiet trust forged by hardship. Whenever Hoai turned and caught Hung's gaze, she would grow slightly flustered. She knew she owed him so much, not in terms of legal matters or evidence, but because he had stood firmly by her side when the whole world seemed to turn its back. And Tony, that innocent little boy, seemed to sense the warmth forming around them. Every time Hung came over, Tony ran out to greet him even before Hoai did, lifting his tiny arms asking to be carried. Sometimes, Hoai found it both funny and deeply touching, as if not only she, but her son as well, had found a sense of safety in this quiet, patient man. But then, at night, a question would quietly slip into her mind. Did this ordeal bring her and Hung one step closer? She had never allowed herself to think too far ahead. Life with Tony had been difficult enough that she didn't dare open her heart again. But the way Hung cared, the way he shielded her and her son, the way he sacrificed time, effort, and even sleepless nights, all felt like a silent promise that he truly considered them important. As for Hung, was something growing in his heart that even he hadn't acknowledged yet? Did he realize that every time he saw Hoai smile, his chest warmed in a way he couldn't explain? Would he dare take another step forward, or would he stay at a safe distance, afraid of hurting her? How would the future of this small, fragile family change after surviving such a storm? Was the incident the end of their suffering, or the beginning of a new journey, one filled with trust, protection, and perhaps, something deeper? Everything remains uncertain. Stay tuned for the next episode to see how their story unfolds, because sometimes, right after the storm that nearly breaks us, fate leads two people to find each other in the most beautiful way.
Hello, xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Mình đang làm video live trước. Cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong video sau nhé. Cái này bye bye mọi người.